What's up, guys? Mitch from RespectMyReligion.com. Welcome back to the RMR Podcast, episode 30. Today, I'm joined by special guest Joseph Lekach from Massachusetts, coming in from the co-founder and CEO of Apothca, a vertically integrated cannabis company out there in Massachusetts and beyond. You guys are in Oregon too, correct?
Yeah, we have a store in Oregon, and we're applying for some licensure in other states now.
So, vertically integrated, going for, they got that multi-state operator title, but not the big bad one, just because a company is in multiple states. I think they get that by default. I don't know. Some people are scared of that title, but thank you very much for joining us. I kick off every episode around my guest's origin story with cannabis. It could be personal, professional, a little bit of both, whatever you care to be vulnerable of sharing. But I'm just kind of curious your personal history around the plant.
Sure. So, when I was younger, I bought into the craziness of marijuana is bad for you. So if you ask any of my friends from high school or even from college, who was the least likely person to have gotten into the cannabis business, they would have said me. And it really was a lot of just ingrained into me by my parents. Marijuana is bad. Marijuana is bad. By my family, marijuana is bad. And so that's what I believed. And when I was in college, actually, it was my first time trying marijuana. And I got home from college for a break. I had gained a bunch of weight. So my mom basically was accusing me nonstop. I know you're smoking marijuana. I know you're smoking marijuana. And I was just like, no, I haven't, and I didn't plan to. And when she just wouldn't let it go, I called one of my good friends, who was a big user, and said, okay, I'm ready to try it. And then the next day, I went to my mom and I said, now I've tried it. But what really guided me into this business and this industry actually was my parents and my family. Basically, on both sides, I don't have the best genetics. So my dad, my uncle, my grandfather, they all had benign brain tumors. And when my dad had his, it took 3 surgeries over the course of a month to fix the situation. And during that month, they were pumping him full of Dilaudid, which is a really heavy opioid and very addictive. And thankfully, he did not become addicted to it. But a lot of people would have become addicted after that kind of treatment. So I viewed cannabis as a good way of fighting the opioid epidemic from that side. On my mom's side, my mom's mom had early onset Alzheimer's, so I never really got to know her. She passed away when I was 5, and she didn't know anything at that point. My entire life, before my life, she just didn't know what was going on. Fast forward to today, my mom's older brother has Alzheimer's. He's kind of checked out at this point. And my mom, at the time that I started this, didn't have anything yet, but now Parkinson's and dementia, and it's rapid deterioration. And so when I started to look at cannabis, I saw that as something that, will it help with neurological disorders? I don't know, but it may help. And so what's the harm in, consuming cannabis if it doesn't impact, or negatively impact, I should say, my life, for the hopes that maybe I could stave off Alzheimer's, dementia, or Parkinson's for myself, and then for my kids at some point. So that's what really got me into it. And I should also say that last fall, I had a surgery, and they gave me Vicodin or some other opiate. And the first day, I took it as prescribed. I was taking 1 pill every 4 hours. The second day, the prescription called for 1 pill every 6 hours, and I pushed it to 1 pill every 8 hours. And every hour on the hour, I was dosing like 5 milligram edible to try and help manage the pain. And I was able to get off the Vicodin really, really fast. So I personally have seen how it could be used, and it was a very painful recovery. So I personally have tried it myself, and it's worked for me to not have to deal with opiates.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think that, the power around cannabis, whether people come from a recreational use background or understanding the medical components, I think a lot of people in this industry that are involved with companies or at a higher level have some sort of purpose, greater purpose. I think that's what drives a lot of, visionaries, creatives, and leaders and entrepreneurs. And a lot of them seem to tie back to these medical benefits or these parts of the story that just shape their entrance of really fully diving in. So very much appreciate you and sharing that. And, and I'm stoked to continually see cannabis, the research behind it for what it can help with, the various ailments and diseases, and whether it's directly helping with those or just the relief from those. There's a lot of different reasons for cannabis use.
Well, an interesting thing someone told me probably at this point a year and a half ago is marijuana is not a medical thing. Whether it's true or not, I'm not an expert, so I can't tell you. But he said it from a different perspective. Imagine if for the next year, or sorry, not year, the next 100 years, everyone in the world got together and decided water is bad for you. You must drink Coca-Cola. And if you drink water, it's the devil's liquid. Don't drink water. Humanity would suffer tremendously over those 100 years. And when you started to drink water again and cut out the Coca-Cola, all of a sudden, so much of your functions would start working well again. Humans have endocannabinoid systems. We need cannabis. We need cannabinoids. And so is it that cannabis itself is medical, or it's just what the body needs to be properly regulated? And that's why it could affect you so positively in so many different areas. So I thought that was a really interesting point made, and it's something that I still think about a lot. And I think it's the correct method of looking at this as at this plant. You have a situation where this wasn't allowed for such a long time, and now it is. Hell, even women's breast milk produces cannabinoids for the baby. It keeps the baby sedated, so like that the baby falls back asleep and gets him hungry again. It's a natural part of what we need. So is it that cannabis is medical, or it's what the body needs to properly regulate different functions?
That's a great. I'm gonna carry that with me as well. It's a great example. Whoever put you on that was on a philosophical level with that one.
Exactly, and it makes total sense to me when I think of it like that.
Yeah,
it was weird to me that one plant could help so many different aspects of your life.
And that's a great point, yeah, because that's the thing. Like when people, a lot of people that aren't as hip to cannabis as myself are asking me, I hear it does this and does this, and I'm like, listen, it's not. You're not going to smoke weed or take an edible and miraculously have every ailment of your life, cured and figured out. It's just like anything else. It does different things for different people, and it affects different people in different routes. None of us are the same. None of us experience the same. But that's a great point, because it's the same. I like that. The water, it's not like water is this. It's a lifeblood, something that we need to survive. But it's not like drinking water in itself is gonna do this or that. But if you take that away and try and fill that gap with something else, then definitely you will see various ailments from that.
Exactly. And by the way, perceptions of cannabis are shifting even with older generations. I remember when I first wanted to look at this industry, I sat down with my parents. I sat down with my mom and my dad. I said, I want to explore the marijuana industry. My dad is sitting across from me from his desk like this, just angrily looking at me, not saying a word. And my mom says to me, is it legal? I say, kind of. Can you make money? I said, I think so. Well, then go explore and let us know what you find. And at this point, I wasn't dating my now wife yet. And as a good Jewish mom, she looks at me, she says, "Wait, but how are we ever going to get you married when they find out what you do for a living?" And so it started like that with my parents. And in the end, now my dad takes cannabis to help him sleep. He likes the tinctures and edibles. So I make sure he always has what he needs to help him sleep. My mom refuses to try anything, and it's become harder to get her to try something, even though it could probably really benefit her in particular. But like even my grandmother, who's now in her 90s, if you ever asked her like 5, 6, 7 years ago, what does Joseph do for a living? She started off by saying, don't even talk to me about that. and then evolved into something with medicine. And literally a couple of weeks ago, she calls me and she's like, I remember you told me you had this cream that could help me with my back pain. If I'm having trouble sleeping, I'm willing to try it now. And so I took it to her, and then I saw her on Saturday. I try and see her a couple of times a week, hang out with her, my kids, and all that stuff. And she's like, can you bring me some more, please? With progression.
Yeah. It's as legalization, continues to grow across the country, especially the medical front, that we're past the tipping point. We're on the downhill slope of legalization sweeping the nation. And we just need, and people's perceptions are shifting alongside that. But, part of this tipping point, I feel like for me personally, the Massachusetts market being the first, East Coast market, if I'm correct, that went adult use beyond just medical, which is, for me, adult use is mainstream, right? I think everybody can get behind, hey, cannabis has potentially has medical benefits, and that's why we see medical cannabis in so many states. But I think adult use is just that, inching that closer to that goal line of just normalization. And since you guys have had that on the East Coast, what has been some of those shifts of kind of going from a medical market to a rec market, and kind of how has the public perception also shifted alongside that?
So along the way, there was a staunch opposition to launching recreational. You had virtually the entire political establishment of Massachusetts lobbying against the voter referendum in 2016. It was incredibly intense, and they used every scare tactic in the world. People driving high, more accidents. Kids are going to get access to this. Never mind the fact that most kids have free access to marijuana through their friends, through local dealers. I mean, I'm sure if you walk into a high school and open up every locker and backpack, you'll find more marijuana there than in any one of my stores. And so it was a lot of scare tactics to really get there. And then it passes in 2016. The legislature takes it over. They change a lot of what passed. And it still took them another 2 years to actually launch it. It didn't launch until November or December of 2018 with the first two stores, Netta in I think Northampton, and Cultivate in Leicester. And it was a complete nightmare for those two municipalities. Think about it. East of the Mississippi, it's not just the East Coast, east of the Mississippi, these are the only two recreational cannabis stores open. Of course it was going to be a disaster. Yeah. People were driving from everywhere just to go to these two stores. Hour-long waits, crazy traffic. It was a nightmare. But now a store opens, no big deal. Doesn't matter anymore. That's the beauty of it. New Jersey's going rec. New York is going rec. Connecticut's going rec. Maine went rec. It's not a traffic driver. It's not creating more accidents. Kids are not smoking marijuana in higher quantities. So all the fear tactics have really gone away. And I think that you're seeing that in polling from the support for legalization continue to grow.
Absolutely. And what is kind of, the origin of Apothca? I mean, you guys were in the medical market and have shifted with this. What's kind of the origin story of that business?
Sure. So when I went to school in Massachusetts, I'm born and raised in Florida. I've lived in Massachusetts multiple times throughout my life. In school, with my first business, I moved out there for about 6 months. And with this business, I moved out there for about 2 years to really get things started. And so for me, when I decided I wanted to get into the medical market, I didn't really want to look at the West Coast. My entire family's in South Florida. And so I wanted something a little bit easier access to start out with. And I knew the Massachusetts market well. They were getting ready to do their second round of medical licensing in 2015. And so I decided, let's jump into that. So we did. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never done municipal lobbying before. I'd never done a regulated industry like this before. And so something that I had to learn as I went. It was a lot of chaos trying to figure it all out at the beginning, but we did. And for me, I really tried to focus on really good areas to put our company. From a cultivation perspective, we're in Fitchburg. It was actually a friend of mine, Ross Gale. I'm going to say that name only because if he watches it, you'll see that he got a shout out. His family has a business where they buy distressed properties and plants, and either try and flip the plant for whatever function they bought it for, or they sell it off for the sum of its own parts. And so I called him and I said, "Do you have anything for me to see in Massachusetts?" He says, "I have one thing in Fitchburg." So I went to Fitchburg, and it was a 26-acre former Bayer pharmaceutical campus with about 106,000 square feet of structure, split up over 10 different buildings. And it looked like a horror movie. In fact, the guy who plays Desmond from Lost shot a straight to video movie of a chemical spill on that site at some point. It was really scary. I mean, there were some buildings you couldn't walk into because it was full of tanks and pipes and everything, but it was decommissioned perfectly. Massive phase 1, phase 2 environmental reports done through the EPA. And I saw what that campus could be. At the same time, I was also looking at another city in Massachusetts called Holyoke, and Holyoke wanted to give me a 250,000 square foot building. And Holyoke was attractive for me because the electricity costs there were substantially lower than other parts of the state. They generate their own hydroelectricity there, have great internet access. And so it was very interesting to me. And the mayor was incredibly supportive of the industry. But the 250,000 square foot building, when I took my general contractor, he's like, they might be giving it to you, but it's a $15-20 million remediation job to clean out all the lead, asbestos, all the crap inside of it. So what I ended up finding within the city of Holyoke was a 14-acre plot of land that I could basically build what I built in Fitchburg, but the city council president didn't want me to be able to have it. It's still sitting vacant. So it wasn't in the zone. The mayor was supportive of it, but he said I needed to get the council president, and the council president didn't want me to use that property for cultivation manufacturing. So we ended up going with the Fitchburg plant. We cleaned the hell out of that site in terms of got rid of a lot of things. The guys who sold it to me, we gave them a few years to also take some of the equipment off the property. We built a 32,500 square foot Nexus enclosed greenhouse that we could flower all year round. So 24/7, 365. We were the first greenhouse in Massachusetts, and it's gone incredibly well. So we try to also focus on environmental sustainability, and by working with a greenhouse, you're not fully carbon neutral. You're still still have electricity, and you're still using natural gas and things like that, but you substantially reduce how much you spend. We probably use about 1/10 of the utilities of a pure indoor cultivation facility. So we were able to do that, and then on top of that, last year for the first time, we had an acre of outdoor cultivation. So we cleaned it up, we set it all out, we planted in pots, not into the soil, because we like to be able to control the nutrients that the plants are getting. And cannabis plants really suck everything out of the soil. So there's not that much control. And it went really well with that acre. And that was really green. So the utilities on that were security equipment and the irrigation system. So really almost nothing from a utility perspective. Now that we could only do 1 turn a year, the greenhouse operates all year round.
And so
that's how we thought about it.
How many greenhouses? Do you guys have one big greenhouse, or it's sectioned off into multiple buildings?
Sectioned off into multiple zones. So there's 10 zones within the greenhouse. And the idea is every single week, one zone comes down, it's harvested, one zone is cleaned, and one zone is populated.
Okay. So keeping it on that cycle. And then for outdoor, you said you did 1 acre. And then with that product, did you guys end up putting that into concentrates and edibles? Did you put that into flower for sale, or all of the above?
So it's going to end up being all of the above. We sold some of it for extraction. Some of the flower is really nice. We're actually putting together a new brand that's going to be for outdoor, and it really is looking great. I mean, my expectation was that 0% was going to be good flower, and somewhere around 30% ended up being good flower.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a tricky year. We had a hurricane hit Massachusetts. Yeah. It was raining much more in Boston, in the Mass area than normal years, and the plants survived it all. And honestly, they thrived. I think we found the right set of genetics. One set of genetics really sucked, so that one obviously is not going outdoors anymore. And I was honestly just surprised as all hell by the results.
Yeah, it's difficult. Outdoor cultivation is difficult, especially in areas. I live in the Seattle area, but parts of Washington State are very difficult. As a lot of that traditional outdoor that everyone kind of lusts over is that Emerald Triangle. It's just the perfect appellation of soil and temperature. But even still, with the fires and these environmental things that are way outside of our control, affect each crop. But that also adds the different, same thing as wine, right? It has the same dynamics. Different harvests provide different characteristics and hold different value points with consumers in terms of which one's their favorite or the one to go after.
And maybe a little smokier flower.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that when I was in Boston in September, and that's what everyone was like, yeah, it's usually not this rainy. And I was like, I felt right at home, man. I'm from Seattle. It rains all the time over here. So
you got to move out of the Pacific Northwest. You'll live a happier life.
Yeah, I know. It's
not to Florida.
It's finally starting to weigh on me. So much of my younger years were spent in recording studios where I didn't even have windows, so I didn't care. But now that I'm not in a cave the majority of my day, the lack of sunlight is, it's not that great, man.
Well, Florida's a great place to live. I'm going to pitch the state to you. No taxes, freedom.
All right. It's been a long time since I've been down there. I'll have to check out the Southeast sometime, man. Maybe once they turn rec, it'll give me business reasons to go out there. But I'm not interested in visiting medical markets right now. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask too. Is I know you guys have 3 dispensaries right now. Currently, 2 are medical and adult use. 1 is strictly medical. Can you kind of give me the synopsis? I know Massachusetts turned from this vertically integrated medical to adult use, but it's still fragmented. The same thing we've seen in other states where once it goes adult use, some people don't really know how to keep medical and adult use there. Some states' goals, it seems like, their goal is to kind of eliminate a lot of the medical and move towards this universal adult use. What's kind of the temperature between these 2 different variations and how they kind of coexist or work against each other?
Well, so in certain states, I think that they messed up the rollout of recreational in terms of they needed a lot more separation between rec and med. What Massachusetts did well was it's only a virtual separation, which means our cultivation is technically under a medical license. We then transfer the product to our stores or our wholesale partners, and in the transfer, we're able to designate it whether it's medical or recreational. If they have a medical license, it goes medical. If they have a recreational license, it shifts to recreational for that delivery. And then once you're in a store, like in our stores, we try and keep both menus, the med and rec menu, pari passu, so very similar looking. But sometimes something will sell out on med. There's more inventory on rec. And so what we offer our patients also is we're able to change inventory on the fly. So we're able to move it over virtually from rec back to med. And so we'll do that for patients if they see something on the rec side that isn't currently available on the med side. So I think that Massachusetts allowed for the rec and med licenses and markets to coexist properly. Where I think that they did make a mistake was it's far more expensive to maintain a medical license than a recreational license. So, for example, one medical license, the renewal fees for the year is $50,000. It's a big renewal fee. On the rec side, since it's broke up into multiple parts of the value proposition, retail is something like $5,000 or $10,000. Cultivation varies based on the size. Product manufacturing is another $5,000 to $10,000. So, like, I have 3 medical licenses and right now 2 recreational licenses, and soon going to have a 3rd one for the med-only store. If in theory I'm only cultivating under 1 license, why should I pay $50,000 for all 3 renewals? They should really charge me for the rec price on retail for at least 2 of those. That would make more sense. Also, to register agents, it's different in Massachusetts than on the West Coast. On the West Coast, you as an employee will go do your background check, get registered with the state licensing authority to work in cannabis, and then you can move from company to company at your discretion. It's a good employee benefit that the West Coast has. In Massachusetts, we as the employer have to background check and register all of our employees. But it even goes further. So I walk around with 5 and soon to be 6 different cards because I can't also register myself for my company. I have to register myself per license. A med and rec co-located store, and you have 2 registrations for that store. So it creates a big burden. And then again, talking about the price disparity, the medical side charges $500 for a registration. The recreational side is $115 for a registration. So they have opportunities. The CCC, when I say they, is the CCC. They have opportunities to improve the value proposition of the med market to try and attract more companies to go into the med market. And I think that hopefully at some point this primarily new panel, will really look at that and look to adjust the regulations. I mean, I have some friends in the industry in Massachusetts that started out medical, and as soon as they got the rec, they just stopped their medical process because it didn't make sense for them to do it. They have the whole vertical just in different pieces. You make the medical work better from a value proposition for operators, and why not sign up for it?
Yeah. It sounds like unnecessary hoops and a lot of extra coin, which is not any stranger to any part of cannabis regulation.
Exactly. And from a patient perspective, the patient count did slow down as soon as the rec passed. So, and I understand that rec is coming. People don't necessarily want to be on a list, even if the list doesn't really exist. I mean, I've never had a medical card anywhere, even though I could have gotten one in Mass when I was living there. I could get one in Florida today, mainly because I don't want to be on a list because I also have a concealed carry permit. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be. I don't want to be on both those lists.
Yeah, and I can identify. I've been a long time member of the cannabis industry. I always call it pre-industry, but I never subscribed to getting the card for various personal fears. But being in Washington, once it went rec, the prices, you don't really save that much by being. It just doesn't. I don't know. For me, it's not that big of an issue. I know for some people it is, but from the patient and consumer side, what does that savings look like? I guess being a med patient versus a rec consumer in Massachusetts.
So there's a bunch of different buckets. First, the easy one is the 20% sales tax. Patients pay 0% sales tax. Adult use consumers pay 20%. That's the biggest one to say right off the bat. The second one is coupons, promotions, discounts on recreational sales in Massachusetts, but you can on medical sales. So, for example, we have daily deals in our stores for our patients only. Today is, what day is Monday? Munchie Monday, 15% off edibles. So only available to patients. I wish I could offer that to adult use consumers as well. So aside from saving on the 20%, you'll have these discounts and promotions available on the med side that you won't have on the rec side. And then it's also, from an experience perspective, recreational, you're limited to 5 milligrams per dose, 100 milligrams per package. On the med side, you're limited to your state limit, which is 10 ounces every 60 days. So there are no dosage limits. If you need 100 milligrams to be able to fall asleep because you're in chemo and it's destroying you, you could get that much easier on the med side than on the rec side. On the rec side, you have to buy an entire chocolate bar, an entire bag of gummies, and you have to consume all that. On the med side, you could buy a 1,000 milligram chocolate bar and take off a little square if you wanted to. So that's another big difference. And the third one is, on the med side, you have your own line. So the only real separation in the store is meds patients have their own lines, priority access to get into the dispensaries, and all that you need to have is a stanchion to really separate the two lines. So from a convenience perspective, it also helps in that perspective to be a med patient.
So it sounds like if I move to Massachusetts, I'm getting a medical card, man.
Probably. It would make sense for someone like you.
Yeah, and that was one of my things on my trip out there of noticing like the 5 milligram limits. I mean, I get the thought process, right? Like one of the biggest fears in terms of cannabis becoming legal and normalized is people overdosing or over consuming. I'll say, because overdosing is an inaccurate statement in my opinion. But I fully understand, the person who doesn't know what they're doing and drinks too much soda and gets way too high, and then they're nothing's really going to happen, but then they might go to the emergency room and then they're taking away that bed or that that caregiver for someone that, more serious. It's not, if someone's freaking out, having a panic attack, it's serious. I'm not trying to devalue that, but it's just not the same, right, as someone that comes in off a traumatic injury. But as a consumer that's well vetted in the world of cannabis as myself, I like the 1,000 milligram, 500 milligram edibles, not because I consume all of it at once, but because I can just take a little bit and get, 50 to 100 milligrams, as opposed to, like you say, 5 milligram soda. I don't drink soda. So you're telling me I have to drink fucking 10 of these to get to my, my desired limit, just for some casual leisure activities. And it just doesn't, I don't mesh very well with that. But at the same time, if you have access to legal cannabis, your list of complaints is still pretty privileged. So.
The way I look at it is, I think a 10 milligram per dose makes more sense. And it still keeps the market open to lower dose edibles. I mean, we produce CAN in Massachusetts, CANN, and they have their high boys, which are 5 milligrams per can, and they have 1-to-1 THC CBD, which is 2.5 milligrams of each. So you could have both markets. Just because you set it at 10 milligrams doesn't mean everyone's producing to 10 milligrams. Hell, our chocolate bars, the way that a lot of them have, a lot of the companies produce them is the whole bar 100 milligrams, then each square would be 10 milligrams, but then you could cut it's different, it's delineated so that you could do a triangle for 5 milligrams. There's nothing wrong with being able to do that, and I think 10 milligrams makes more sense for me personally. 10 milligrams of an edible is what I need to feel something. It's what I do during the day. At night I go to 20 milligrams if I want to help me sleep.
Mhm.
And so I just don't want to consume that much chocolate or gummies or whatever I'm consuming.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want to eat a whole bag of snacks to whether if you're seeking medicinal or even recreational, effects. It's not something that you want. Um, for you
No,
guys, oh,
that
oh,
bag of snacks gets followed up by another bag of munchy snacks.
yeah, exactly. Because then now I'm eating 3 bags of gummy worms. It's a vicious cycle. Uh, um, the Massachusetts market obviously coming. You guys were established in medical, which was vertically integrated, moving to adult use. That still exists. That license type. Out here on the West Coast, there's certain states that don't allow that. Certain states that welcome it. It gives a nice business model wise. It gives a nice strategic advantage, but as the market matures, that advantage kind of shifts, right? Where you're able to produce every good that you sell, but as the market matures, there's going to be consumer demand for other products that aren't necessarily the products you have, and a consumer might want to come in and buy multiple products. So now you guys are at a point where you're able to produce a lot of products in store, but also able to wholesale those products to other stores and carry other stores, potentially vertically integrated products to your stores. What kind of unique components of the market does this kind of business model and structure kind of set up for you guys?
Well, it really is different for every single company. So I can't speak for the industry as a whole. I know some vertically integrated operators that don't care. They're only going to sell the stuff that they produce. I look at it more like a Trader Joe's model. In any category I compete, I want 80% of the sales. And I'm good with bringing in the other 20% from outside. There's brands that end up mattering, brands that don't. The ones that matter, I want them in my stores. So I'm, for the most part, agnostic to that. I just want 80% of the sales to come from my products. So that's really the way I personally look at it, and it's how we've been executing.
And what do you kind of determine as the products to fill that 20%? Is it to fill kind of some strengths where you guys might not be as strong? Is it where the consumer demands lies? Like what's the thought process on that?
It's a combination of both, I would say. So, like for example, a great product that's sold in Massachusetts is Coast Cannabis chocolate bars. I was lucky enough to meet Angela, the CEO of the company, before they even really got started. Her and her partner Brian. We went to their facility, which is in southern Massachusetts on the South Shore area, and on the way to P-Town. And for us, what really struck me about them was the quality of their chocolate. So they, that first visit, gave me uninfused samples, and I swear to God, I would love those chocolate bars uninfused just to eat. They were that good. And so when they launched, we went pretty aggressive with them. We brought them in to the stores, and we did whatever we could to really promote and push it because it was just a great product. And so we've done that with a lot of different companies where we try and a new company comes in, veteran-owned, minority-owned, things like that. I'm Hispanic, so I try and also pass that forward and help people succeed in the industry. Sometimes they sell well, sometimes they don't. I like to try a lot of the different products myself just to see and be how it is, how it works, how you feel, how it tastes, the texture. And sometimes they're good ones, sometimes they're bad ones. If there's bad ones, we figure out a way of getting through them, and then we keep bringing on new guys and trying to find the right wholesale partners to have the right products in the store. It's really trial and error.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great way to gauge edibles in this market. Pre legalization. Honestly, I personally preferred the edibles. It tasted like weed. It made you feel like it was going to get higher. Now at this point, with all this nanotechnology, all this science and infusions and different types of extractions, I always gauge like edibles when I eat it, and I'm like, even if this wasn't infused and I could buy it for $1 instead of $20 a package or $2, it'd be like this would be in my cupboard at all times, and those are the edibles that are easy to consume.
Well, it's funny because one of the things I told Angela from Coast is I want to make the same chocolate bar, but instead of 100 milligrams per bar, I would like to see a 20 milligram bar. Call it your savor bar. Because I'll eat half of the bar if it's that good.
Yeah.
And she hasn't done it yet, so I have to keep bothering her.
Or just keep getting those uninfused samples, you'll be all right. Another thing that's unique about Massachusetts I want to bring up is your guys' testing requirements for flower. I've constantly heard within that industry, a lot of people don't like testing anywhere, but I know you guys might take the cake in terms of just rigorous testing. What are some of the components that go into testing that are kind of unique to that market?
Well, let's talk about cultivating flower in general, because you kind of get screwed on the way in and on the way out. So on the way in, you get screwed because the Department of Agriculture, MDAR, controls what can be put on the plants. And they've erred on the side of caution by basically saying nothing. Organic materials, I think it's 23B, the classification, that do not have EPA registration numbers. So something, for example, that I'm sure you've seen in a lot of cultivations is Clonex, root hormone gel for clones. That is not allowed in Massachusetts. Something that simple. There's other different materials that in other states you're able to put it on. Some of these chemicals have half-lives of 10 days, 20 days, and then it's just completely gone. And so if you're even able to put a little bit of that stuff on vegging plants, it opens up the market in a tremendous way. But you can't put it on anything, even though the half-life is so short. So you really are stuck in a position where citric acid, lavender extract, other bugs, that's really what you're able to do to control your cultivations. Then on the way out, the testing is incredibly rigorous. A lot of states test to the parts per million for yeast, mold, other bacteria, things like that. Massachusetts, it's parts per billion. So it's a much more stringent testing regime, which when we got into the business and into the market, when we realized how hard it was going to be to cultivate flower, we put all of our focus and energy on getting that right first. We've had a lot of missteps. My first grower, I remember our first harvest was in August of 2018. And obviously I'm very excited. It's my first harvest. I'm happy. And the entire thing was full of mold. Store's getting ready to open. We have no product. Wholesale was virtually non-existent. We were able to find enough to just stock the store to start. But that head grower quit the same day that he did the harvest. And I didn't rush to find another head grower. I tried to take my time. I let his number 2 and number 3 take over for that time period. And we finally found someone good. He started with us in January of 2019. It took about a year to really cycle into starting to see his work on the genetics that the old grower had brought in, because you have plants in various different cycles. And some of it was able to be made better right off the bat, but you have to wait until nature takes its course. And then, so that basically took you through all of 2019. And in 2020, we finally brought in a bunch of new genetics. The new guy decided that he wanted these genetics. We brought them in as seeds to make sure we're not bringing any kind of infections from plants from any other states. And so when we bring them in from seeds, you then have to go pheno hunting. And that takes a lot of time. So this new seeds that we brought in at the end of 2019 didn't start hitting the store until like late fall of 2021. Sorry, that we brought in at the end of 2020 didn't start hitting the stores until the late fall of 2021. And right now we have a new batch of genetics that we augmented that first batch that's going to start hitting the store probably next month or so. So we try and bring in new genetics every single year now, but it just takes time to filter it in. So going from one grower to the new grower, it was a hassle to wait all that time and to let nature take its course and have the patience to be like, fix this right now, not to do that. Understanding what you're dealing with in terms of a plant. And so now our flower is, honestly, it's really good. And there's some patients and consumers that tried the old stuff that isn't very good or wasn't very good, and haven't come back to try the new stuff. That's great. And in a greenhouse, we took 4th place in the High Times Cup last year versus all indoor growers. We were number 4 out of, I think, 19 entrants. So it talks towards what we've been able to accomplish with our new guy, and he's not so new anymore. His name is Byron, but he's not so new anymore. But our second guy, I should say.
Yeah, it's and I think a lot of consumers don't quite understand that. Once you lift up the hood of the industry and look in at this as an agricultural plant, you have a potentially 4-month grow cycle plus a cure, and then getting it all ready, dried up, packaged. But even like you said, from planting a seed, it's not just a 4-month grow. It's a 4-month grow to know what you're looking at, and then you clip off some clones, and then it's a 4-month 4 months turns to 8 months real quick. And then, like you said, when every environment is different for every strain, and then will a strain last one generation to the next and next, or will it just only live 1 or 2 and start to die off? There's so many different components that 2 years is not that long of a time in a cultivation room to fully get everything dialed in and set up, right? It's not
Exactly.
it's not oh, this crop sucks, we need another one right now. It's not, you can't turn the switch like that.
I wish you could. That would make life easier.
Absolutely. It is farming a very intricate plant that has a lot of needs for it, and reacts to just a million and one things, a million and one different ways, man. It is.
Well, then the interesting thing about Massachusetts also is a lot of cultivators don't take the time to properly cure their flower because you just have to get to market. And my grower was begging me, give me a 60-day cure. That's what he begged me for. I need a 60-day cure. I'm like, you don't have the time. You just don't have it. And then when COVID started and Governor Baker became the only governor in the entire country to say recreational cannabis is not an essential service, so the entire rec market went shut down from one day to the next, I called up Byron and I said, Byron, from now until whenever he turns this around, that's your timeline to get your cure cycle that you want. Because once you work it into your cycles, it's not hard to get to 60 days because it's just part of your cycle. It was a 61-day shutdown. Literally a 61-day shutdown. So Byron got his 60-day cure. And since then, we've been on the same cycle of 60-day cure.
Man, well, that was sounds like it was a blessing, inside of a curse right there.
Man, it was very nerve-wracking. I'm not going to lie. Overnight, 95% of your sales, or 90 to 95% of your sales disappear, and your fixed costs are basically the same. We only laid off 3 people from our entire organization. We try to keep it as nimble as possible. We care about our employees, so even our store staff, I could tell you, me, my CFO, and my head of HR were on with lawyers, understanding all the different potential programs that our employees can take advantage of, because we can't, as a cannabis company, take advantage of PPP or EDIL, none of that stuff. But with the stores, when you lose 90 to 95% of your business, you don't have the hours to give to your employees anymore. And what we were able to do is figure out a way of cutting everyone down to half their hours, but we gave them all the tools to get the other half paid for by state and federal programs. So we gave them the ABCs of how to do it, instead of other companies that were like, figure it out. I'm sure you can figure something out, figure it out. We told them exactly how to do it. And I think that was really, really good for us as well. But at the same time, again, you just have your fixed costs. I only was able to lower them so much. Yeah. And it was very scary watching the account balance go down every single day. It's not fun. Yeah. I can different business model for myself, but I can definitely attest to very similar feelings over a portion of 2020. Back to the cultivation, right? Like, flower is king. A lot of people understand that flower is one of the leading SKUs, categories that's sold in the market, but it's also the basis of, you don't get edibles without flower, you don't get concentrates without flower. So what was the emphasis that you guys really put on to getting the flower dialed in first, and then trickling those components into these other product categories? I mean, it's literally just that. Focus on flower. We did nothing else for a while. We wanted to just focus on the flower and do whatever we could to make that good, because then all of a sudden you're investing $1 million in a lab, and then $1 million in a kitchen, and then all the HR that comes behind that, and the management side of things would then be split between focusing on these 3 different segments, and within these different segments, multiple other segments. And so all of our energy and resources went to getting the flower right, which is where we got to now. And now we're starting to produce other products as well. We haven't brought in the full extraction thing, but it's what we're looking at right now as the next big machinery purchases. Let's bring in a lab, and not just jump right from there into edibles. Let's get the lab done right first. Let's make sure that we're doing concentrates properly. Let's make sure we're doing vapes properly. Once we get all of distillate, isolate, make sure we're doing all those different product types properly. Once we get that dialed in, then we move to the next step, instead of trying to do it all at the same time.
Absolutely. And then what are some of those, back to the testing too, what I've heard in the Massachusetts market is something around the moisture content in flower. Could you give me a little bit more context on kind of the testing requirements and moisture for flower?
There is no testing requirements for moisture in general. It's just, if you leave a little too much moisture in, you have the potential that it molds up. So people go a little drier just to make sure you don't have any mold. I think we get down to, depending on the strain, 8 to 11% moisture content in our different strains at the end of the grow cycle and the cure cycle, I should say. So everyone does it their own way. I'm good enough to talk about this and sound smart and intelligent about this to people that know less than me. But Byron is my guy that handles this stuff, and I've been able to learn a lot, but I can't handle it the way he does.
Yeah.
Again, just depending on the strain, 8 to 11% is usually where we try and target it. And thankfully, we don't really have any mold or PM issues, which is nice. I think that talking about the testing and the restrictions of what you could put on the plants, I think a lot more of the indoor guys have had issues with failure on flower than we have, for a very simple reason. When you're indoors, like you said before, something gets in, you're kind of screwed. And in the West Coast, if mold spores or PM spores get in and start settling on the plants and start circulating throughout your facility, you do have agents that you could put on to the plants to fight back. In Massachusetts, you don't have those agents. So if you get something indoors, you're kind of screwed. In our greenhouses, we pump a lot of air through those greenhouses. And so, as an example, in the summer months, I think every cubic inch of air in our greenhouses is evacuated once a minute. So all these spores don't have time to settle in on our plants. We have other issues, which we find ways of mitigating, but at the very least, these issues, we don't get it because the air is just flowing through those plants so hard that the spores don't have time to settle in on them.
No, that's a great point. And I think
my hypothesis.
But I think a lot of people also don't get that. I mean, it's very, when the issue comes into, a single plant, a clone, once it infiltrates a facility, it's all about mitigating. And it's not a matter of, if, it's a matter of when with it, and you don't know what. But those issues come in, and I think that's a great point of greenhouse and outdoor has that airflow that allows things to maybe move. Maybe, might in some cases it might work against you in a negative way, that airflow, but more often than not, I'm sure that's probably a proper hypothesis that it could just help mitigate some of those issues a little bit better. What has gone into building a brand in Massachusetts? If switching from medical to recreational has opened up, like we were saying earlier, it's opened up normalization where more people are talking about it. There's more distribution points. Laws and legislation have now, I think, in a lot of cases allowed for more advertising. I know Massachusetts, like many markets, is still pretty restricted in terms of advertising. But what are some of the components that have gone into building a brand around Apothca?
So I think that the first one is your experience within our stores. It's not always perfect, but we put a lot of emphasis on individualized service. There's some guests that are going to come in, and I want an eighth of Flow G, a chocolate bar, and a gummy. And they already know what they want. It's a 2-second transaction. But there's some people that don't know what they're doing, want to talk about it, want to understand the different products, different ways of ingesting. And then within the flower, for example, what are the differences between the different strains? So I think that us having our emphasis on that in-store service is a big part of it. From a market perspective, it's also restrictive. There were some people that had billboards before us, but it was very coy billboards about not really, putting it on the nose. Mm-hmm. And for us, there's a billboard above our Lynn store, but about 12 inches off our property line. So it's not counted as our premises under regulations. And I bought that billboard for 3 years, and I went right on the nose. The first version of the billboard was just in big marijuana retailer with 2 down arrows and then all the fine print underneath it. Mm-hmm. And I actually sent it to the CCC to approve it because I think it was the first one that was just directly on the nose. Mm-hmm. My lawyers thought I was crazy, and I sent it to the CCC and to the city. The city had no issue with it, and my lawyers didn't think the CCC would even respond to it. And in the end, they actually gave me the thumbs up. And since then, you've seen a proliferation of billboards that are very explicit throughout the Commonwealth, because that's really the best way of marketing it. Can't really do social media ads, even though I wish I could, because you could be hyper targeted in that fashion. Can't really go with radio because you have to be able to prove that 85% of your audience is over the age of 21. Mm-hmm. TV, that one takes you. Pandora, Spotify, none of those will take you. So you really are very limited. So we do what we can, which is we try and show up at events. We try and provide an amazing customer experience within our stores. We try and provide a great product at the end of the day.
And then, another question I had is looking at, you guys have the license to distribute Can, and Can being a major brand on the West Coast, their marketing rollout, they had mentions from Ellen when it was coming, they had one of just kind of the biggest and best marketing rollouts for cannabis brands that I've ever seen, although it was primarily targeted on the West Coast. Have you seen that brand kind of penetrate into the Massachusetts market? Were consumers aware of that product before it launched, or has that kind of been an educational standpoint, being that a lot of their messaging didn't really exist in that market when it first rolled out?
So there was some brand awareness. It wasn't the biggest. It wasn't like a West Coast brand awareness, but there was definitely brand awareness to it. And then we worked really closely with Can to make sure that we got the sales materials done properly. A lot of pop-ups, so really introducing consumers to the brand, non-infused samples, things like that. And all these different things put together is what is driving more awareness of Can, and it's going really well. I mean, Can controls the West Coast. Levia controls Massachusetts, and we sell Levia as well. It's a great product. In our own stores, Levia still outsells Can. It's local. It got to market first, and it went really, really wide within Massachusetts. And so I think that Can is doing really, really well. The sell-through has been great. We're onboarding new accounts every week, and we're getting reorders every week from all these accounts. So it's definitely picking up steam. I think the flavor profile is fantastic. I think the brand design is really, really catchy. And I'm really happy to be working with them.
Awesome. Yeah. I went to the Levia facility when I was out in Massachusetts and checked that out. That was awesome. I heard a lot about their success, and so I was curious. So thank you for sharing that. I was curious how Can was infiltrating that market. It's tough when you come in and there's already a product category leader, but there's obviously plenty of room in that seltzer market for other brands.
And I think that the one-to-one beverages, which is Can's bread and butter, I think that is a big differentiator with Levia. Levia, you get 5 milligrams. Can has their high boy 5 milligrams, but we sell 6-packs all the time of the 2.5, which are great. It's a great product.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's back to the earlier conversation about the edible THC requirements in general. For consumers like myself, that's not I don't prefer that, but I do know so many in the broader demographic of the cannabis consumer that very much enjoy that. And I love that product category because it kind of, I know some people get annoyed of the alcohol to cannabis comparisons, but I think when a 21 and older person's partaking in a 21 and older good for the sake of a recreational use, I think having something that's a similarity, right, to another behavior or a product that they consume, I think it just helps make it easier, and that lower dose makes it just assimilate to cannabis. And honestly, I think it helps normalize it and breaks the stigma down a lot faster.
Man, absolutely. And Mitch, I'm sure you drink beer sometimes. At least.
Yes.
You'll drink a 6-pack, no? What's the difference of drinking a 6-pack of beer and a 6-pack of a cannabis-infused beverage?
Yeah, I mean, but even still, I gotta get these infused beverages a little bit higher for me. But I
don't know. Yeah. If you drink six 5 milligram things, that's 30 milligrams. You should get a buzz off that.
A little bit. Maybe if we're talking 10 milligrams. But no, I do think that, and I definitely see it. Like if I'm at a barbecue this summer and there's a cooler and there's beers in there and there's infused seltzers, I might dabble back and forth, or I might just stick to one, and I think I love that it just has that. And again, it just breaks the normalization of, I mean, as much as I love rolling up blunts and consuming cannabis, I do get that's not proper for all functions. Whereas sipping just an infused seltzer is pretty, you could do that at a barbecue or a birthday party or some family birthday party.
Well, it's funny because like last year, my wife's family had a big family dinner. And I turned to my wife more as a joke. I'm like, should I bring some edibles? She says, sure. So let's see if anyone eats them. My wife, her mom, her mom's boyfriend, her aunt, her 2 aunts and their husbands, her grandmother, everyone ate the edibles. Everyone. It was a really fun night. And so it shifted the focus there. And it was the right kind of product for the right kind of environment. And everyone tried it, even though they're not really users.
Right. We're breaking the stigma, man. What else do you guys have on the docket for 2022?
2022 is an exciting year. So our Boston store just opened medical. The grand opening is officially this Wednesday on the 9th. We should be able to add adult use sales to that by June, maybe July. So we're really looking forward to that. We're going to be launching some new products and some new brands to really start segmenting the market differently. Right now, everything we sell is under the Apothca brand. And so we need something a little lower end, a little higher end, as long as the products that we're packaging into those brands actually are higher end and lower end. Mm-hmm. I don't just try and put different labels on things unless it warrants it. And so, we're really going to be expanding a lot in Massachusetts. And then we're looking at other states. We have applications pending in one other state right now on the East Coast that we're excited about. We'll be applying in at least one other state on the East Coast as well this year. And so, maybe we'll win 2 licenses in 2 more states this year. And then it comes down to, okay, now we have to operate in a lot of states and make a big investment. And so, it's all exciting for me.
Awesome. Well, plenty of growth. I look forward to watching from afar, and I got to come check out one of these dispensaries on my next trip to Massachusetts.
And our cultivation.
Yeah. I got to swing by and check out the greenhouse, man. Would love to visit.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you hopping on here. For people out there that are interested in finding more, you guys can go to their website, apothca.com. I don't know if I have the link in the description, but the company name's on there, AAPOTHCA.com. Spelled it right. I told you I was illiterate. I gave you the warning before we started. But awesome, Joe. Thank you for coming on. This is the RMR Podcast, episode 30. We will see you